buenas tardes, bienvenidos todos a este Salón Rojo de la Facultad de Derecho de la Universidad de Buenos Aires. Es un placer para mí darles la bienvenida a esta actividad en la que, como saben, estamos compartiendo con el relator especial, esperen que el título es tan largo que siempre lo digo mal, sobre las formas contemporáneas de racismo, discriminación racial, xenofobia y formas conexas de intolerancia, el señor Mutuma Ruteere, que ha sido designado en este cargo por el Consejo de Derechos Humanos de Naciones Unidas. Como veo un montón de caras conocidas en esta sala, gente que ya ha pasado por las manos de muchos de los profesores de Derechos Humanos de esta casa, ustedes saben que los relatores especiales son parte de los procedimientos especiales del Consejo, que en su momento fue la Comisión, y que básicamente, como en este caso, el mandato es un mandato urbi et orbi, norte, sur, este y oeste, que las capacidades de los relatores básicamente cubren tres áreas. Por un lado, recibir comunicaciones, por otro lado, hacer informes sobre el tema sustancial del mandato, en este caso todos los temas relativos a la discriminación racial, y en tercer lugar, proponer lo que llamamos el mover las fronteras del derecho, tratando de dar interpretaciones más actualizadas y más integradas. Por eso para nosotros es un placer que hoy esté aquí el relator Ruteere. Esta actividad, como ustedes saben, es una actividad que está organizada por el Centro de Derechos Humanos de la Facultad, y yo quiero agradecerle muy especialmente por su compromiso, por su presencia, por su tenacidad en esto, a los estudiantes de la maestría en Derechos Humanos, en Derecho Internacional de los Derechos Humanos, y especialmente a algunos de ellos que han sido más activos que otros para poder lograr que este panel tuviera lugar. Quiero también agradecerle a la subsecretaria, voy a decir mal seguramente tu cargo, pero me corregís, la subsecretaria de Promoción de Derechos Humanos de la Nación, a Marisa Fresco, y agradecerles a todos ustedes y pedirles que aprovechen de esta ocasión, que es importante. La experiencia que Mutuma Ruteere ha podido capitalizar en estos años es una experiencia interesante, porque no es la de los libros solamente y no es la de la práctica solamente, es la de las dos cosas juntas, y además es una práctica en la cual hay intervención activa de autoridades de Estado, de militantes y también de ciudadanos rasos, de víctimas, que son esas personas que son imposibles de eludir, son imposibles de no evaluar en su total justeza cuando uno está llevando a cabo este mandato. Así que, thanking you very much for joining us. I know this is not your first visit to the law school, but for us it's a great privilege having you here, and we give you the floor, and we are waiting for your wise comments in such an important issue. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Professor Pinto, and thank to all of you for coming this afternoon. I'm particularly grateful to the government of Argentina at whose invitation I have just completed a country visit. This is my second country visit to this region. My first visit was to Bolivia in 2012, and I'm quite glad to be back in this region to assess the situation in Argentina, which is at an interesting and important point in its political history, and therefore presents a very interesting opportunities for addressing problems of discrimination and human rights in general. I will say a few things about the findings of my visit for the last 1 week, but I want to begin by doing a short reflection, if you wish, or looking back to exactly what we do as special procedures of the United Nations. This is not just because we are at a university where this should be an interesting perspective to get, and I know you have produced quite a number of experts working in this field, so this is not totally unknown to you. But also on a personal note, this is my final year serving as special rapporteur. I complete my mandate next year, so as always happens, towards the end of one's undertaking, there is the tendency and the need to do a kind of reflection. It is also, last year we also marked 70 years of the United Nations, and that's an important and interesting occasion on which to reflect on particularly the successes, the challenges, and the potentials of implementation of human rights globally and through the United Nations system. Also very interesting, last year marks 50 years of the Convention on Elimination of Racial Discrimination, which is the first United Nations human rights treaty. And again, an important and interesting opportunity to think about human rights and specifically the struggle and challenge for in combating racism and racial discrimination in the world. So very briefly, and this is not unknown to students of international law and international politics, one of the major challenges we have to grapple with often in this work is how do we enforce cosmopolitan values in a world of nation states? And ultimately, in my view, this is the challenge at the heart of the struggles and the frustrations of in thinking and implementing human rights in the United Nations system. Now let's begin with the good news, and the good news is that in the last 50 years or so, the idea of human rights has really acquired a hegemonic status, so much to the extent that no one really denies the validity nor the importance of human rights. Not even the worst states in the international system reject the idea of human rights. And we've come, it might look like a trivial point, but it is true that we've come a long way to the point where the idea of human rights is not dismissed as just another irrelevant ideology, but certainly a representation of a certain consensus on global values. It is also remarkable that in the last 50 years we've witnessed what one of the ex-writers on human rights calls a theoretical revolution in international affairs in the form of the thick network of international treaties on human rights that have emerged, that have been ratified by states, but also the emergence of regional as well as international mechanisms for promotion of human rights. Think of the Inter-American Commission, Inter-American Court, European Court of Human Rights, International Criminal Court. It's a whole range of international institutions that 50 years ago would not have been imagined and would actually have this dense network of international institutions promoting human rights. So therefore, as Michael Ignatieff writes, human rights has truly become the lingua franca of global moral thought as English has become lingua franca of global economy. This success, however, is tempered by what former UNI Commissioner for Human Rights, Mary Robinson, has described as a failure of implementation on a scale which shames us all. A genocide, ethnic massacres, deadly conflicts, winning empathy for refugees that we now see, growing shamelessness in xenophobic rhetoric by mainstream politicians, and growing political influence of extremist and violent movements and groups have all certainly dampened the idealism and tempered the triumphalism of those who saw the ascendance of this liberal idea of rights as the herald of a new and kinder moral world. So the trumpeted end of history and the emergence of a new liberal world order that would be kind to human rights appears in 2016 as celebration that came too soon, particularly in the background of the many of the conflicts and problems we are experiencing in the world at the moment. Of course, it's well known again to you as students of international law and international politics that the international human rights system with its laws, institutions, is a product of state politics and indeed reflects the strengths, the weaknesses, and the contradictions of that system. students of international politics also know about the long shadow cast on the various international instruments, laws, and institutions by the Cold War, the geostrategic interests, the national interests, and the cultural identities of various members of the United Nations. So that history is well known and need not detain us for too long. Suffice it to say, well, a lot has changed in the last 50 years in the politics of human rights protection. The international system fundamentally and to a large extent remains largely driven by states and still reflects to a considerable extent the logic of its foundations and origins. One can argue that the evolution-changing design of the international architecture of human rights reflects the constant tensions and challenges and also possibilities, as I pointed out before, of the implementation of cosmopolitan values in a world that is far from that cosmopolitan ideal. Within the United Nations, the Human Rights Council is the hub for the many efforts to advance human rights globally, and those of you who follow the developments within the United Nations know the politics and the logic behind the shift from the Commission to the Human Rights Council. Part of the major reason for that shift was an attempt to create a more effective, much more relevant institution, not weighed down by the partisan politics that have become very characteristic of the Human Rights Commission. And that explains the shift, or the logic, part of the logic of the shift from the Human Rights Commission to the Council in 2006. Of course, some of the concerns also had been that the Commission had been selective in its focus on the human rights record of some countries over others, and was not very open in its consideration of conflicts against countries. The creation of the Universal Periodic Review, for instance, is an improvement of that, so that every country now is subject of a form of assessment of evaluation by the Human Rights Council. Moreover, the UPR complements the treaty system, which had been restricted by the condition of ratification. Within the Human Rights Council, of course, is the special procedures, and Kofi Annan, the former Secretary General of the United Nations, has termed the special rapporteur system as the crown jewels of the United Nations human rights system. The system of special rapporteurs who serve in their independent capacities is best understood within the context of this ongoing struggle to protect human rights against the limitations of a state system. By their design and approach to work, it is evident that these mechanisms seeks to complement the measures within the larger system. And the mandates keep growing, and I sometimes can't keep track of how many mandates exist. I think there are 40-something mandates in 14 countries, specific mandates, maybe 60 or so. 60 or so mandates. Mm-hmm. Part of the core work, of course, is Mónica said, is to undertake thematic studies on the issues under their mandates, which are submitted annually to the Human Rights Council and for some mandates to the General Assembly. Thematic studies allow for the analysis of specific issues beyond identifying violations and perpetrators. They allow states to see the underlying conditions, drivers, patterns with respect to the particular issue. They also present an assessment of progress and offer practical recommendations that draw from the analysis and assessment of good practices. And this is therefore ought to be, in my view, is one of the key aspects of the United Nations Special Rapporteur system, the ability to present these complex reports on an issue of human rights in this complexity that probably would not be done, say, through a treaty system. The second important point that I want to stress with regard to the Special Rapporteur system is the issue of voice and visibility to victims. The technical and diplomatic nature of the human rights mechanisms may limit the interaction with victims and also limit their participation within the United Nations system. Special rapporteurs, on the other hand, receive complaints, meet victims during country visits, attend and participate in initiatives by civil society groups that have a focus on victims. This allows special rapporteurs to strengthen the voice of those who are victims of particular human rights violations and allows the voices of victims to be heard, particularly through country visits and country studies. So country visits like this, part of what we do is actually meet with individuals who might themselves be victims. The third point, the third important aspect of the rapporteur's work is the fact-finding capacity, such as this one. This unique feature of special rapporteurs allows them to undertake country visits in all the regions of the world, and this provides for opportunity for a comprehensive assessment of a state on a specific areas of human rights. It is also an opportunity to meet a diversity of factors in government, in civil society, and community levels. It is an opportunity for these human rights experts to assess and observe conditions in person, something that may not probably happen among the ambassadors within the Human Rights Council. Of course, visits are limited by many factors. One of them is that states have to consent for a visit. States have to accept the request for special rapporteurs and work with the special rapporteurs on a visit. And there are many, many ways in which states can play the games of appealing to cooperate or not cooperating. Luckily, in the case of Argentina, we haven't faced that problem, and that's why we're here. The fourth point is that the rapporteurs engage in what I call promotion diplomacy. Special mandates, special rapporteur mandates, allows for the engagement with the states on an issue through communications, consultations with officials, academic visits, through media interactions, through civil society interactions. Special rapporteurs can issue statements of concerns or of support to particular state policies. This is all part of diplomacy of promotion of human rights that these experts undertake. The fifth point is follow-up on implementation. Now, I must admit that follow-up on implementation, in my view, remains the weakest limb of the UN human rights system. For various reasons, we seek to follow up the recommendations of other mandates, but sometimes the system doesn't work very well. For instance, most rapporteurs are not able to undertake follow-up visit to look at the implementation following a country visit. But certainly this is supposed to be part of the important work that special mandates and rapporteurs actually undertake. Now, one of the strengths that special rapporteurs bring to the system is independence. In appointments as well as in operation, states stress the question of independence, and this is certainly an issue that all special rapporteurs guard very jealously. And in my assessment, there have been very, very few, and my colleague Mónica has a longer understanding of the system, very few instances where rapporteurs have given in to demands or have been accused credibly of being acting under the instructions or in favor of one particular state or the other. This is something that all rapporteurs in my assessment guard very, very jealously, because it goes to the core of the integrity of the system, but also the integrity of their work. Now, that's not to say that rapporteurs therefore are immune from accusations of non-independence. Country experts or experts appointed with a country focus, in particular, often do come under attacks by subject countries many times, accusing them of lack of independence, and there's no shortage of many interesting stories that rapporteurs can tell you about the times they have been accused of acting on the instructions of pushing a certain country's agenda through the system. Now, that's part of the politics of the system of human rights, and very often we forget that the promotion of human rights works within a political system, and it's very hard to 100% remove these political considerations or political interests from the system. Special rapporteurs and special mandates continue to be hobbled by state non-cooperation. And states also choose to use mandates to fight national interests and score political points against each other. So some states will want to invite specific rapporteurs on an issue where they know they don't have a problem, but when the other rapporteur, where that country has a problem, requests for a visit, they will not grant that visit. This is part of games that states play for those of you who follow, for all of you who follow this system, you understand how the system operates. Of course, the other major challenge is the limited resources that remain a challenge. I pointed out that the mandates keep increasing, the budgets don't increase. This is a very well-known point. It's out there in many publications that human rights is one of the 3 pillars of the United Nations, but human rights remain awfully underfunded. Indeed, some have pointed out that the entire UN human rights budget is much smaller than the budget of New York Fire Department, and you can use any other relevant figure in this country. And I looked this up. In 2015, the UN human rights budget of $173 million US. The Fire Department of New York, on the other hand, had a budget of $3.8 billion. So you can see where the priorities of human rights is in regard to the resources. So the system, really the special rapporteur system, is ultimately about trying to do a lot with very little. There's many imperfections, but many strengths in my view. It delivers to victims recognition, in particular, that the world is not indifferent to their suffering, hope, and hope that someone is listening. Sometimes it brings change. In my view, ultimately, it is about changing the world through small, modest steps. I want to say a few things, having done that broad overview of the mandate. I want to say a few things about my visit to Argentina and my findings that I presented in a press conference this afternoon. We have had very many meetings at different levels, national, provincial level, with officials, representatives of independent agencies, civil society groups, community members at local levels, and in the city of Buenos Aires, in the province of Buenos Aires. We went to Formosa and we also been to Salta. Now, one of the most exciting and interesting things for me is that Argentina has put in place an extensive and comprehensive legislative architecture for promotion of human rights. Indeed, it's remarkable in many places that we went that the language of human rights is there in virtually every government office. It is not something that, in my view, needs to be introduced. It's become part of the policy pronouncements of government. And also the fact that Argentina has put in place very interesting and important independent institutions. Indeed, the Ombudsperson's office, we had the pleasure of meeting with officials from that office, other independent institutions such as the office that provides oversight over prisons, the Observatory of the Media, the Public Defender's Office. All these are institutions that, in my view, are so important as part of this infrastructure of protection and promotion of human rights. The legislation on migrants, too, is very, very progressive in my assessment. It is something that Argentina is proud of, and rightly so ought to be proud of. It is certainly a good practice that should be shared and exported possibly to other countries. Having said that, though, I also made a number of observations about the remaining challenges. And one of the major challenges in Argentina has to do with indigenous peoples. We had the opportunity to meet with officials in institutions that work with indigenous peoples, as well as government officials in ministries who work on these issues. We also met civil society groups that work on indigenous issues, and we met indigenous peoples representatives and members of the community themselves. The situation is, to say the least, appalling with regard to indigenous peoples. There is lack of basic services in those communities, basic health, education, water, roads, housing, and also there is widespread invisibility. It's also widespread invisibility of indigenous people in most sectors of the society. In all the places we went, I asked about the positions occupied by indigenous people in important and relevant positions of authority, and in most of the places indigenous peoples are absent, including in institutions established to promote the rights of indigenous peoples. This is a big problem. This reinforces their poverty, their marginalization, and it's, in my view, one of the biggest human rights problems in Argentina at the moment. We also noted that there is increasing repression of leaders of indigenous peoples who are organizing indigenous peoples, and growing criminalization of protests by indigenous peoples. I've met many leaders who have several pending cases, who report of threats to themselves and their families. And I also met civil society as well as other individuals who are non-indigenous but who work on indigenous issues, who themselves have been threatened because of the work they do with indigenous peoples. So this is one of the major challenges. I noted that in every place there's very good practice with, at least at the policy pronouncement level, in addressing discrimination against women. I think that is something to build upon in addressing the situation of indigenous peoples. In terms of programs, in terms of affirmative action, it is, in my assessment, not going to be possible to lift the status and situation of indigenous peoples without comprehensive, deliberate, affirmative action programs. But also programs that are based on a national strategy, and also a strategy that brings in the provinces and led from the highest levels. There's a lot of good, interesting things, in my view, that are going on in the situation of indigenous peoples in terms of health, education, but most of them are from a perspective of assistance and welfare. And that's part of what is the problem with the system. What indigenous people or any other groups that is marginalized usually need is not welfare or charity, but rights and justice. So it needs to be a strategy that is based on rights and justice rather than assistance and welfare. We've also met other minorities. We met with representatives of people of African descent who also have a complicated history with regard to Argentina and are also largely invisible in the society. In particular, the issue of recognition of indigenous people's history as well as place in the Argentinian society is one of the issues, and this can be done. There are many good examples and suggestions on how this can be done in education, in thinking about history, and making certain cultural acknowledgements. And this is a good opportunity because we are just beginning the decade of people of African descent, which Argentina at the international level is one of the leading countries in promoting the decade of people of African descent. So it's a good opportunity to build on that momentum and make those intentions of recognition. I also met representatives of Jewish groups, and there has been, as you very well know, problems with neo-Nazi groups in this country, and also a complicated past with regard to some of problems of anti-Semitism. I heard about some good progress with regard to dismantling and prosecution of members of these neo-Nazi groups, and I think these are the steps in the right direction with regard to dealing with the problem of neo-Nazi groups. We met migrants groups who live in this country, and as I said, this is a good practice, the way Argentina has welcomed migrants. But of course, there are problems again in terms of beyond the legislation, policies that would help migrants in the integration within the society itself. At the moment, there are gaps in that aspect. There are also problems of interaction between the police and migrants from particular communities. Particularly, one of the issues that kept recurring is the violent confrontation between migrants from Senegal who sell in the streets and police. And again, an issue that requires attention in terms of addressing that relationship and reforms in particularly the way the police handle those migrants. We discussed the new focus on development goals and the 2030 agenda and the interesting, important work that the ministries are doing to link this with development of these groups, minorities. And also we had discussions with the National Institutes on Statistics. And one of the things that we found is that there are no good statistics. That's why we are not able to find out how many people of indigenous origin, for instance, are in particular positions. I know there's a whole huge discussions about collecting statistics, but we need these statistics. Without these statistics, we don't know who is left behind. And there are many creative ways of collecting this data, using this data, and applying this data. Institutions, some places where the state doesn't collect data, universities have taken up that role of collecting data, disaggregating data, and undertaking those analyses with regard to discrimination. That data, those studies go far to feed into the policy making process and also assessment of states with regard to human rights. We had an interesting discussion with regard to education and the intercultural and bicultural education process that is ongoing, particularly, specifically with regard to indigenous people. Education, in my view, remains an important mechanism for dealing with marginalization, but also discrimination. It is not possible to lift certain marginalized minorities out of poverty, out of marginalization without investment in education. So investment in quality education has to be central to that. One of the challenges with the bicultural education, in my view, and from the many conversations we had, is that it is unicultural. It is unidirectional in its approach. It is a lot of indigenous people standing about the majority culture and not enough people from the majority culture standing about indigenous culture. So that interaction needs to be strengthened to be truly a two-way form of interaction. I was also here, and as I said in my earlier comments, part of what you do is follow up on recommendations. In 2011, the Special Rapporteur on Indigenous Peoples was here, made large number of recommendations with regard to indigenous peoples, and a considerable number of those recommendations are yet to be implemented. And part of the discussions we had with the government this morning is the need to implement those recommendations and also implement recommendations from the Committee on Elimination of Racial Discrimination, as well as the Universal Periodic Review. Overall, we had a most interesting visit in terms of the discussions we had with officials, and I must say again, this is one of those visits that were very fruitful in the kind of information, but also the kind of openness that we found in the various sectors. To a large extent, Argentina is not a poor country, so that helps a lot. There's resources to do many of these things. There's the ability to address many of these things without necessarily having to look for resources elsewhere. And there is existing human resource, there's good legislation on that. The challenge is the implementation. And that implementation, to end from where it began, that implementation is part of these processes of influencing political systems, of working with network of actors to push and incentivize and put pressure on policymakers and political leaders to actually implement human rights in a comprehensive manner. So, thank you very much, and good to hear your comments.
Thank you so much. I guess we can open for questions for a while. Okay. Después de agradecerle al relator, abrimos un espacio para preguntas.
Antes que nada, muchísimas gracias por compartir su experiencia con nosotros y por darnos unas horas de su tiempo en esta visita. Quería retomar principalmente la idea de los datos, que creo que es algo muy importante y una deuda pendiente en nuestro país en general en estos últimos años. Y quería saber si tenían alguna recomendación en particular de algún país que recientemente haya atravesado por una situación, digamos, como la nuestra, y que cómo ha ido, digamos, encarando la recopilación de datos, cómo se han ido, más que nada porque hay un, digamos, como usted mencionó, tenemos por un lado la sociedad civil que recopila datos y por otro lado el Estado que recopila datos. Entonces, ¿cómo piensa usted que puede ser una buena forma para encauzar ambas fuentes? Y por otro lado, en uno de sus informes, el último, el de abril de este año, comentaba sobre la falta de denuncia de los delitos, por un lado, y las dificultades en el registro. Si tiene alguna recomendación en particular que nos pueda hacer, en especial en estos grupos en situación de mayor vulnerabilidad que mencionó. Gracias.
Otro comentario, pregunta. Le vamos a dar la palabra al relator mientras ustedes van calentando motores, ¿cierto?
Well, thank you very much for that great question of data. And I'm not sure, for instance, Argentina, there's any legal prohibition, for instance, from collecting ethnically disaggregated data. Now, some countries have that problem. For instance, in Europe, for historical reasons, you understand why there's a legal prohibition. I mean, if you go to places like Rwanda, for instance, and you want to collect ethnic data, there's going to be a problem. So one has to take into account the context of the countries and they understand why those countries may sometimes not want to collect that data. But even in those countries where you may not want to, legally you prohibited from collecting that data, in my experience, it's very often a very easy way out of not collecting this data. It's a cop-out strategy. It's a way, it's an easy way out for the state to say, we are prohibited from collecting disaggregated data, we can't collect. And of course, the next step is that, yeah, there's no problem. And because we don't have data, we assume there's no problem. And that's where the problem is. So it's the recognition that even if you are prohibited from asking the ethnicity or race of an individual, there are other ways of collecting this data. I did a country visit to Spain where there's a legal prohibition to collect these forms of data. But universities are collecting this data. The state is giving money and resources to universities to undertake these studies because universities can do it. It's only the state that cannot ask this, but independent research institute universities can do that. So if a state is not collecting data, if a state is not supporting and investing in universities to collect this data, then clearly there is a very deliberate policy of not collecting that data. Without this data, we don't know what is happening. That's not to say data is a solution, because there are many places where you have excellent data collection. Some departments, police departments in the US, United States for instance, do a good job of collecting data on police in public interactions. That has not necessarily translated into better practices. So it is collecting data, but with a strategy and a plan for utilization of that data to assess what is working, what is not working, where the problems might be. Let me give you a good example that I found in Spain with regard to policing. Because of the problems of profiling, racial profiling of police officers, some departments have come up with a form that is in 3 copies. When a police officer stops someone, they have to record that they stopped that person, the name of the person, the name of stopping officer. They have to give a description of that person, and then they give that ticket to the person who was stopped. And another copy is kept by the officer who issued the ticket, and the 3rd copy becomes part of the record. Now, that helps if you have accusations of racial profiling in police in a certain department. Then you can go to the records and say, Officer X seems to stop people only people who look a certain way. So that data is good for managers to actually do this form of assessment and evaluation. So there are ways, but there are ways that must be part of bigger plans and strategies of dealing with the problems of discrimination. And therefore we must begin, where we must begin is by recognizing and understanding what the problems are. Then data becomes a tool.
Perhaps self-identification also is a good tool.
And self-identification, absolutely.
Sí, ahí va el micrófono.
Muy buenas tardes. Felicito toda su exposición. Han mencionado sobre Bolivia. Me alegra si ha hecho una visita. Me agradaría, especialmente como ciudadano boliviano, saber su impresión. Pero el punto que más me preocupa son los derechos humanos en el Estado de Palestina, porque allá no se ha podido realizar, no se ha podido poner un límite, un stop, porque sufren mucho, sobre todo niños, madres embarazadas, mujeres. Yo quisiera saber cómo derechos humanos se ha abocado en esa región.
¿Alguna otra pregunta? ¿Comentario? Acá adelante y atrás. Ahí hay uno y acá hay otro.
Buenas tardes, el municipio de
Más fuerte.
Agradecerle por su tiempo. Mencionó que estuvo, además de Buenos Aires, en Formosa, en la provincia de Salta, y hizo mucho hincapié en el problema de los pueblos originarios y sobre la persecución de grupos organizados de pueblos originarios. Entonces no puedo evitar preguntarle cuál es su opinión respecto del encarcelamiento de Miguel Rosales, si usted lo entiende como parte de un problema de discriminación contra pueblos originarios, o si no, si se entrevistó con alguien respecto a ese caso.
Okay. Gracias. Había una mano más allá y otra acá.
Hola. Mi nombre es Visita de Mutuma, la abogada que está en la facultad, y quería consultarle, considero que desde el campo académico también se puede dar un
Yes.
Bueno, acá, ¿no?
Buenas tardes, muchas gracias por estar. Tenía dos preguntas breves. La primera es, se está desarrollando la cumbre humanitaria en la ciudad de Estambul estos días y el problema de los migrantes y los refugiados es un tema muy interesante y muy importante a abordar por la comunidad internacional. Quería saber, a su criterio, cuáles son los principales desafíos de los principales países receptores de migrantes, sobre todo con estas olas de xenofobia y de rechazo abierto hacia los migrantes y refugiados. Y la segunda, si usted habló de educación intercultural o multicultural, en la cual de a poquito estamos trabajando, y quería saber qué experiencia ha sido para usted interesante, innovadora o a tener como referencia para trabajar en vistas a replicarlo aquí en la Argentina. Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much. The lady from Bolivia, yes, thank you very much. I did do a country visit to Bolivia in 2012. It was a very pivotal moment in the history also of the country. There were many things that were ongoing, and hopefully a number of them have been completed now, including major legal reforms in many areas. But also that study and that visit also pointed out quite a number of the pending challenges. Bolivia still remains a country that has significant challenges with regard to indigenous peoples. It's of course, as you very well know, the only country where you have an indigenous president. So in terms of visibility, that is one of the things that is not a major challenge now in Bolivia. But again, many of the population there remains very poor, sometimes isolated. Huge problems with the land and landowners, and the negotiations and the conflicts over land remain some of the major problems. So yes, quite a significant progress in my assessment, but still the main problems that affect the poor populations remain to a considerable extent in Bolivia. I haven't been there since then, so some of the things probably have been implemented, including national action plans on racism and xenophobia, which the country began implementing, reforms of the judicial system, including recruitment of judges from various diversity of the community. So a lot of things that, in my assessment then, were quite promising in terms of addressing problems. Did you mention Palestine?
Yes.
Palestine, yes. Palestine, of course, remains one of the major issues in the international system. And my colleague here knows this very well. For us, the special rapporteurs, this remains a challenging issue for many reasons. And it's something that the human rights mechanisms probably have not found a very effective solution in dealing with that problem. But it could be that possibly the solution doesn't lie with the human rights mechanism. My own view, now speaking in my own view, not as rapporteur, if that's possible, is that you need the engagement of the Security Council. You need this is where the major power lies. It is a problem that has to be resolved ultimately by the states themselves. And if you categorize the United Nations in three parts, you can see there is the United Nations, that is the United Nations of States, the United Nations as a secretariat, and the United Nations of independent experts, civil society actors, and independent actors. Now, the major power of the United Nations is with the first UN, the first United Nations, that's the United Nations of States. And many of the problems that have to do with the sovereignty, with dispute over territories, can only be resolved by nation states themselves. The UN is a good forum, but ultimately it has to be the states within that forum to resolve this problem. So I'm not sure this is a satisfactory answer, but in many of these cases there are no satisfactory answers, and sometimes we have to live with this form of unsatisfactory solutions. The other question is the question of the activist who has been imprisoned. Yes, I'm aware of that case. It's been mentioned to me. Unfortunately, I don't have all the details to make any conclusion either way or the other. But the point that I made on the criminalization of activists and attacks on activists working with indigenous peoples, I think is something that we need to pay attention to. There are many other activists at community levels who have not yet been, their cases are not concluded, but they are going through the judicial processes. And this is one of the worrying developments because then it cripples the growing movement of community organization from the grassroots. And that's a challenge. Without community organization of indigenous people, they cannot achieve this developments that we're talking about. They cannot achieve political power, they cannot achieve voice. And that's something, that space needs to be protected. Those activists need the support and solidarity of those who work on human rights. And certainly, I think luckily Argentina has independent institutions that I know are working with many of those activists to address some of those problems. I think there lies a lot of hope in dealing with that problem. Gaps in terms of research, I think there is a wonderful opportunity for academia to actually deal with this problem. We need institutes on indigenous peoples. We need centers that study indigenous peoples and know the complexities and generate data and resources in various disciplines. This is the richness in terms of intellectual power that universities can bring into this. And because of the unique and complex problems within this region, there is no shortage of researchable topics or issues to actually work on in partnership with activists, in partnership with civil society groups and communities at local level. So there is a lot that can be done. I hope we can get professors who are indigenous persons who are working on these issues, because that's part of the struggles of all peoples who find themselves in the margins, is them finding the intellectual voices and finding the intellectual tools and resources to articulate their own problems and their own struggles. That's very important to invest in, and that's part of the contribution that the university can make. The point of humanitarian summit, you might be interested to note that all rapporteurs have issued a statement on that, a joint statement. It's online, you can look it up. It is something we have been following very closely because of the same problems that you're mentioning. Indeed, my report this year to the Human Rights Council is on the question of xenophobia, and again, the people who are subject to xenophobia a lot in many of these countries are migrants and refugees and people moving for whatever reasons from their own countries. And what we are seeing is a very worrying trend that's most towards tearing down this architecture of norms that have been built in the last 50 years, through the rhetoric of political leaders, through the electoral victories of extremist political movements in many parts of the world that basically are organized on the basis of xenophobic discourse and exclusion and scapegoating migrants and refugees. Without, of course, remembering that all of us come from somewhere, and all of us are tomorrow's refugees. That's an important understanding that seems to have been there post-Second World War, particularly in Europe, and that history seems to be very easily forgotten in the moment where there are all scares about security and insecurity. And the kindness of hosting strangers seems to be disappearing in this climate of fear about security. That's not to say there are not genuine problems of security, but it's to say genuine problems of security cannot preclude the responsibility to provide safe refuge for refugees and people running away from persecution. The UN Secretary General is hosting a conference in September, I think, on the question of migrants and refugees. So again, it's quite an interesting movement at the international level with respect to this. And as rapporteurs, we've been very categorical and very insistent on the need to put human rights at the center of the agenda. Sorry, the bicultural question. I think there are good examples to be. I don't have off the top of my head some very good examples, and there are some. I could get them from my visits to other places of these forms of bicultural innovations. But my question was with regard to bicultural and intercultural programs that seems to go one direction, seems to require only one community to learn the language or the culture of the others, but not two ways. We all become richer when we learn others' languages. We become better people when we learn each other's cultures and languages. We become better citizens of the world when we invest in learning about strangers. This is what we lose by not learning about us, and that's what I emphasize, that it's a wonderful opportunity to live in a country where you have more than one culture, because we must learn from it, learn its art, its music, its literature, its philosophy. I sat down listening to some of the indigenous peoples, and I could have gone the whole day listening to them. The depth of the philosophy, the clear vision about the relationship with the world and how to live with each other. It's unbelievable reservoir that we lose if we don't learn it.